Today we are going to talk about parts of an expression notes. And I understand you don't have a copy of this, but you should have paper and you should have pencil, and I want you to write these down. So you don't have to do the box, but definitely write this down and write the definition, write variable, definition, and so on. Pause the video. I want you to write the definition for each of these words and the definition for these two words. And then unpause and we will continue. So before we start, we have to know what an expression is. Well, the expression is just one side of an equation. So if I was to make this an equation, I would put equals and then put a value over here. So the expression is just the one side. And we're going to talk about what each of these means. Before we start, I just want to apply some of our background knowledge, things that we already know. And one of the things is when a number is next to a variable, there's not a math operation in between, it means to multiply. A number next to the variable means to multiply. So this is 2n. Also, a little background knowledge is when you have a variable, remember a letter just by itself, what number's in front of it? Well, if there's not a number, it means there's a 1 in front of it. There's one of those. Okay. And then the only other thing I want to kind of remind you about is if I said 3 minus 2, the math operation in front of that number goes with it. So if I said 5 plus 5, this plus 5 would go with the 5. This is 5 positive. This is 2 negative. And what are these numbers? Well, if there's nothing in front, that means it's a positive number. And when we write positive numbers, we don't have to have the plus sign. We only have to distinguish if it is a negative number. All right, so now let's continue with defining some parts of our expression. So here's our expression, the 3x plus 4. Well, what do each of these mean? Well, the 3, that is a coefficient. And a coefficient is just any number that is multiplied by the variable. And see, the number is right next to the variable, so you know that they are being multiplied. So the 3 is the coefficient. The variable, which we've talked about before, is just a letter that's used when we don't know the value of that number. So we just use a variable. It could be x, it could be n, it could be y, it could be r. Just remember that a variable is always lowercase. And then plus, that's just your math operations. You can use addition, subtraction, division, multiplication. And then if it's a number that does not have a variable, which most of your education life you've dealt with, it's just called a constant. There's an actual name for that, and it's a constant. So up here, when we had 3 minus 2, and you would say, oh, that equals 1. Well, each of these, if they are separated by a math operation, this is a constant, this is a constant. All right, and then terms. Define terms. Well, the terms are parts of an expression separated by your math operations. So in this one, we have one term, and we have those 2 terms. They are separated by this math operation. So we have 2 terms. And then like terms, they will have identical variables to the same power. And remember, power is if I had 3 and then I wanted to put it squared, your exponent is your power. So you have to have identical variables to the same power, which means, I'm going to get rid of this so we're not confused, which means if I have x squared and I have x to the fourth. They're the same variables, but they are not to the same power, so they would not be a like term. They have to have the same power. And then, or it doesn't have a variable at all. So if I had 3, I don't know what is it with me and threes, but if I had 3 plus 2x plus 5, well, this doesn't have a variable and this doesn't have a variable. So they would be like terms. I could go ahead and combine them. And I have 3 with a positive 5. So 3 plus 5 would be 8. And then I could just write this as 2x plus 8 because I combined my like terms. And that is the goal. The goal is to make your expression smaller or simpler by combining the like terms. For instance, look at this long expression. There is a lot of terms in here. Remember, terms are parts separated by the operations. There's a lot of terms. So we would like to write it where there's fewer terms. So let's do some examples of our definitions. First of all, terms. Terms are parts of an expression separated by math operations. I say a math operation, 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 right? So every single number or number and variable is considered a term. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6 terms. So I'm going to put a 6. If you have not already done this, I want you to do this now. Pause the video, write this expression, write terms, coefficients, constants, and like terms. And then as we do this together, you should be writing it. In fact, what I would really like for you to do is pause the video, try to answer the questions, and then unpause and see if you're correct. All right, coefficients. Well, what is a coefficient? It's a number that is multiplied by a variable. Example 3x. The 3 would be my coefficient, right? And also, I want to remind you, if a variable is by itself, it really means there's a 1 in front of it. So when you see your expression and there's nothing in front of that variable, you should just go ahead and write a 1 in front of those with a variable, and that way it'll make it easier for you to answer. So coefficients, what are my coefficients? Well, I'm going to put in parentheses just because I want to group these together. Well, what's my first coefficient? Remember, it has a variable with it. It's being multiplied. Well, in this case, 1. My next term, there's a 4 with my variable. My next term, there's a 3. Now, I want you to pay attention to, there was a positive addition sign in front of the 4, so I'm going to write a positive 4. There's a positive or addition sign in front of the 3, so I'm going to write positive 3. And I don't have to put the plus, right? But what do I notice about this coefficient, this 1? What's in front of it? That minus, that negative. So I want to make sure I have a coefficient of -1. And then I look at my next term. Does that have a variable? No. Since it does not have a variable, that is not a coefficient. Remember, a coefficient has to have a variable with it. What is it? Oh, a number without a variable is a constant. So this is a constant and this is a constant. So they are not coefficients because they do not have a variable. Oh my goodness, looks like a banana. What is going on with Miss Royce? All right, now let's drop down to constants. Again, a constant is a number without a variable. I only have one term. Sorry, not one term. I have 2 terms with no variables. So what are my constants? Well, it's a plus 5, so I know it's a positive 5. And it's a plus 8, so I know it's a positive 8. And that's all my constants because all my other terms have a variable with it. And remember, a constant does not have a variable. And like terms. So let's look at our like terms. Like term has to have identical variables and they have to be to the same power. So let's look at my first variable. I have an x squared. Well, here's an x, but is it squared? No. So these are not like terms. So I'm going to look for another x squared. That's a y. Nope. Same variable, x, but is it squared? Is it to the second power? Nope. So this term does not have a like term. So let's move to the next one. These don't have variables, so I'm not even looking at them. Next term has x to, if there's no power, it's to the first power. So I have a y. Nope. Different variables, not like terms. This has the same variable x and it's to the same power. So I am going to say yes, these are 4x and negative 1x, or I could just leave off the 1 when I write it. Negative x. Why did I put the negative? Answer me. Yeah, because there's a subtraction sign in front of there. Good job. Both of those are like terms. And are there any other like terms? Well, I looked at this and I looked at this. These are. Now look at y. Do I have another y to the first power? Nope. He doesn't have a like term. Can a constant, remember constant doesn't have a variable, can they be like terms? Yes, right here, like terms. Doesn't have to have a variable at all. You've been doing this. Have you been adding 5 plus 8 most of your education life? You sure have. So I would say 5, it's a positive 5, right? And 8, it's a positive 8. Those both are like terms. Let me move my arrow out of the way. And what's my goal? Why am I trying to find like terms? Oh, to make my expressions smaller or simpler by combining them. What does that mean to combine? It means exactly what it says. Put them together. So if I take out my subtraction, if I take out my comma, and remember this x was a subtraction x, right? A negative x, and this was a positive 8. I could combine this. If I have 4x and 1x, because remember, if I don't have a number in front of it, I can put a 1. 4 minus 1 is going to be 3, and then my x just stays the same. If I have 4 x's, and I take 3 away, 1, 2, 3, no. If I have 4 x's, sorry guys, if I have 4 x's and I take 1 x away, what am I left with? I'm left with 3 x's. Make sense? And then my 5 plus 8, you've been doing that most of your life. Combine those. 5 plus 8, 13. And now when I rewrite it, if I was to rewrite it, remember I could not, this didn't have a like term. So I'd write 2 squared, and then I combined my x to the first power, and I got 3x, a positive 3x, so plus, cross those out. My y did not have a like term, so I would just write it's a positive 3y. And then I'm left with my 2 constants, and 5 plus 8 is positive 13, so I put plus 13. And then I put my little box around it for solve. I went from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 terms down to 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. Yeah, definitely made my goal. I was able to make it smaller. And now when you progress in math, you'll be able to simplify and factor things out easier. All right, example 1. Excuse me. I want you to pause the video. I want you to answer these questions on your piece of paper, your notebook paper. And then I want you to unpause and I want you to check with me. All right, so hopefully you have this done. Let's look. How many terms are in the above expressions? Remember, terms are separated by math operations. So I have 3 math operations, which means I will have 4 terms. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 terms. What are the coefficients? Well, remember, coefficient is a number with a variable. This doesn't have a number with a variable, so we know it's an understood 1. 1's being multiplied. I only have 1 x squared. So what are the coefficients? Look at the first term. I have a 1. I have a variable, so this is 10, and they're positive. I have a variable here, so the number with it, its coefficient, it's a positive 2. And then 3 doesn't have a coefficient because it doesn't have a variable. That would just be a constant. Which leads us to the next question. What are the constants? Constants are the numbers without variables. The only one that I have that does not have a variable is my 3. So what are the constants? Positive 3. What does the term 10y mean? Well, if we go back to our background knowledge, when a number and a variable is next to each other, it means to multiply. So what does 10y mean? 10 times y. That's all that means. It just means they are multiplied. Multiplied together. And then what are the like terms? I like to circle as I go so I can eliminate. So I'm going to look at my first one. Remember, it needs to have the same variable to the same power. So do I see another x? Sorry. Do I see another x? Yes, I do. I see another x. But is that to the second power? No. So I cannot do anything with that yet. Go to the next one. It doesn't have any like terms, so I go to my next one. Y to the first power. Do I have any other y's to the first power? No, it has no like terms. Let's go to my next one. X to the first power. Does it have any x to the first power? Nope. And then my last one, plus 3. Do I have any other constants without a variable? I do not. So, none. And since there are no like terms, I can't make my expression smaller. It is as small as it can get. All right, how'd you do? All right, let's go to another example. I want you to pause the video. I want you to try to solve on your own. Oops, apologize. I want you to, after you combine the like terms, I want you to write the new expression. So new expression. All right, pause it and then check back with me. Number 1, how many terms are in the above expression? Terms are separated by math operations. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6 terms. What are the coefficients? Coefficients have a variable with it. Well, I'm going to go ahead. There's not a number with my y, so I'm going to go ahead and just put a 1 in front of the y. And that way, every variable has a number with it. So what are my coefficients? I see a 4 with my first term variable. So I see what's in front of the 1, a minus. So I need to make sure I put a -1. And coefficients don't include the variables. The coefficients are just the numbers in front of the variable. My next one is an x. I see a variable, so what number's with it? It's a +7. I see the plus. My next term has an 11, but I don't see a variable, so that is not a coefficient. Go to my next term. I see a variable. What number's with my variable? A +5, so I'm going to write my 5. And then I don't see any variable with my last term, so it can't have a coefficient. So there are my coefficients. This means I have 4 terms that have variables. Do I? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes. All right, constants. Constants are the numbers that don't have variables. Which numbers don't have variables? Well, my 11, but is it 11? It's not a +11, I see a minus. So it's going to be a -11. And the other number, the other term that does not have a variable is my 3 back here. Is it +3 or -3? I see a plus, so it's a +3. I don't have to put the plus sign. I can just write it without the plus sign. And now I'm going to look to see if I have any like terms. Well, look at my first one. Do I have another x squared? I have an x, but it's not to the same power. So it is not a like term. Go to my next one. Y. Y to the first power. Nope. Nope. Here's y, and it's to the same power. They don't have a number above it. So and remember, I'm always going to circle whatever math operation with that number behind it. So what are my like terms? I have, just because I want to group it together, I have a -1y, and I have a +5y. All right, now let's see if I have any other like terms. Here's my 7x. Do I have another 7x? I do not, or not another 7x. Do I have another x to the first power? No. And see, circling those can help me see the ones I have not used yet. Both of these don't have a variable, so 7x does not have a like term. I'm going to go to my next one, -11. -11 does not have a variable. So it's a constant. Is there another number that does not, or another term that does not have a variable? My +3. So down here, I'm going to say minus, because there's a minus in front of it, 11, and my +3, they are like terms. And now I've used all of them. Let's combine. The whole reason I find my like terms is because I'm going to combine it. So in this one right here, I have 5 y's. And then what do I do with one of the y's? I take it away. So this is going to, how many does it leave me? It leaves me with 4 y's. And then my -11 +3, you're able to use a calculator. So you can put this in, just take out your little commas, and you put -11 +3. And if you're using a calculator like this, if you're using a calculator like this little minus down here, I have to turn it on. There you go. on and clear at the same time. If you hit that little minus, it will give you the negative number that you're looking for. And then you could say plus 3, and it would give you a negative 8. So if I combine these, it would equal negative 8. Then if you think about negative 11, I am 11 steps below sea level. And my plus 3 just means I'm walking up 3 of the steps. Where am I? I'm still below sea level, but now I am 8 steps below sea level rather than 11. Okay, and then my new expression. Well, my 4x squared, remember x squared did not have a like term, so I would just write my term all over again. My negative y did have, my negative 1y did have a like term, my 2y's to the first power, and that was a positive 4y. So I'm just going to go ahead and write that 4y. Now my x to the first power did not have a like term, and it's a positive 1, so I'm going to put 7x, cross those off. And then these were like terms right here, and it gave me a negative 8, so I'm going to write subtract 8. And here is my new expression. I went from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 terms to 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. All right, and now your turn. I want you to pause it. I want you to do it. And then check back for your answers. Okay. What are the coefficients? Remember, coefficients are with the variables. I don't see a number with this variable, so I'm going to go ahead and just write a 1. What are my coefficients? 7. I see a minus in front of the 1, so my negative 1. I see a 3. I see a positive 5 with this x. And then these don't have variables. So they don't have variables, they won't have coefficients. Any number, any term without a variable are constants, not variables. Leads us to the next question. What are the constants? Well, the only 2 terms without variables are the last 2. I see a minus in front of that, so it's minus 21. I see a positive or a plus in front of 7, so it's positive 7. And then my like terms. Do I see any other w to the third power? I do not. Go to my x to the second power. Do I have any other x to the second power? I do not. Go to my next one, x to the first power. Do I have any other ones, x to the first power? I do. These 2 are like terms, right? So my like terms would be positive 3x plus 5x. And then I move to the next one. Does not have a variable. This is my constant. This is my constant, no variable. So negative 21, and then I'm adding 7. And I can use my calculator for that to combine it in a minute. Actually, let's do it. So this is 21 below sea level. If I go up the steps, 7 of them. And if you want to use your calculator, whoop, remember you hit that, you hit this little minus sign down at the bottom. Minus. Can you see it? Minus 21. You can't see it. Aha, there you go. Minus 21, and then it was plus 7. Plus 7, and that's going to give you a negative 14. So that equals negative 14. And then what are my like terms? Well, I have 3 x's and I have 5 x's. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many x's do I have altogether? 8x. And hopefully by now you realize all you have to do is add or subtract or whatever it tells you to the coefficients. You don't have to draw out all of your variables. I just wanted to show you how it worked. And now if I was to rewrite it, remember 7w to the third power or cube did not have a like term. My x squared did not have a like term, so I'm going to write my negative x squared. Miss Royce, you didn't write the 1. You can write the 1 or not write the 1. It's up to you. If I don't write the 1, I know that there's a understood 1 there. My x to the first power, I could combine, and it gave me a positive 8x. So I'm going to go ahead and just write that. Cross those off. And then my constants, I could combine, and it gave me a negative 14. So I'm going to put a minus 14. And here is my new expression. I went from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 terms down to 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. And that is really going to help you in next year's math solving that, being able to simplify your expression. 3 expressions that are given. Which set of numbers represent the coefficients in the 3 expressions? Well, let's look. In this first expression, what is my coefficient? Well, coefficient only has a variable with it. This doesn't have a variable, so that's a constant, it's not a coefficient. 5 is my coefficient. Down here, this doesn't have a variable, so that's a constant, not a coefficient. This has a variable, so what number's with my variable? 10. That is my coefficient. And down here, doesn't have a variable, so that's a constant. This has a variable. What number's with it? 4. However, what's in front of that 4? A negative. So I need to make sure I put my negative. And after I've done that, I just look down here. This is saying it doesn't have coefficients. They do. This says 12 is a coefficient. No, it's not, because it doesn't have a variable. So automatically I can get rid of that. If one's wrong, it's all wrong. This one says 5, 10, and 4. 5, 10, yes, but that says 4, and we know it's a negative 4. Not it. 5, 10, negative 4. Oh, that's exactly what I got. So D would be my answer. Okay, that is parts of an expression. The first number, or not the number that's being multiplied with the variable, that's your coefficient. Your variable is just an unknown value. We don't know the value of that number. Your math operation. And then if the number does not have a, if the number does not have a variable, it's called a constant. And you've been adding constants since kindergarten. Our whole goal in simplifying or combining our like terms is to simplify the expressions. So when you do have to find the value of these variables, you have fewer terms to try to figure that out with. Okay. Have a great day, guys.